right, so as workers across the United States are continuing in this massive wave of unionization attempts that we've seen over the last couple of months, we just got some pretty explosive news coming out of the National Labor Relations Board that could have some pretty dramatic impacts that could restrict corporations like Amazon and Starbucks from using some of the main tactics that they typically rely on to rally against these unionization attempts. So here from More Perfect Union, they say breaking the NLRB, which is again the entity that enforces labor law in the United States. The NLRB's chief counsel, Jennifer Abruzzo, is moving to ban captive audience meetings where employers force workers to attend anti-union meetings. She issued a memo today calling on the NLRB board to declare them illegal under the National Labor Relations Act. So the details of the precedent that she's using here is kind of interesting. It's called the Joy Silk Doctrine, and we'll get into a little bit of the history there. But first, let's go ahead and watch just a short clip here from the video that More Perfect Union put together. Credit to them. I'll link down the entirety of it below, but here she is basically just explaining what captive audience meetings are and what she is going to be doing to try to weaponize previous existing precedent to now crack down on corporations who are using these unfair union busting tactics.
Captive audience because typically it happens at the workplace, during work time, mandatory meeting, you can't leave it. Employers do have the right to express their opinion, but they don't have the right to coerce, interfere with, or threaten employees with adverse action.
But the labor board doesn't have to just accept union busting. Abruzzo's got a plan to do something about it.
When there's a case that's brought to me, I'm going to be asking the board to reconsider this doctrine, which is Joy Silk. And basically what it said was, if a union provides evidence of majority support and seeks voluntary recognition and bargaining, and the employer has no good faith doubt that that union actually does have support of a majority of the workers in that particular unit, then the employer should voluntarily recognize. And if the employer does not and engages in unfair labor practices or other egregious conduct, merely to intimidate or interfere with the free choice of voters, then the board will issue a bargaining order and say, you're ordered to recognize and bargain with this union because you're just abusing our processes.
Got that? If employees of a workplace can demonstrate that a majority of them want a union, and then their boss threatens and intimidates those workers, Abruzzo says the NLRB should force the employer to sit down and negotiate with the union.
The remedy would be you are forced to recognize and bargain with this union.
If the Joy Silk Doctrine is in place, it could broadly expand the ranks of unionized workers in America.
Okay, so you get what the breakdown is there, right? It's kind of complicated and convoluted the way that they're going about explaining it a little bit, but essentially it is what that guy there at the end of that clip was saying. So if you have workers who collectively get together, you have enough of them that sign the union cards and say that they are looking to join a union or form one within any given workplace, and you have a majority of them that agree to that, and then they go to the employer and they say, look, we have a majority of the workforce that wants to form this union, you have to recognize our union, then typically what the employer is going to do is they're going to try to deny the validity of that unionization attempt. They're going to try to stall, and they're going to try to implement elections basically that are then going to take place maybe weeks, maybe months down the line, and in the interim period they are going to use this as an opportunity to try to propagandize their workers against the unions. So it's a very clear strategy of what's going on in all of these different corporations. Again, we saw this at Starbucks, we saw this at Amazon, and the captive audience meetings specifically are some of the main ways that they are forcing workers to listen to their anti-union propaganda. So again, it's all about this threat. So what she was saying there at the beginning, where employers do have the free speech legal right to make their opinions about the union heard, yeah, you have the free speech right to make your opinions heard, but not if you're doing it in a coercive setting where you are essentially forcing your workers, either as individuals at their workstations or collectively in these captive audience meetings, you are forcing forcing them to attend these propaganda sessions, and that's not free speech. That doesn't classify as free speech. It's coercive. You are forcing the workers to do it, and so therefore it should be made illegal. So the argument there and the precedent there that she's talking about seems like it's pretty cut and dry, and this is the reality of having a marginally more pro-labor head of the National Labor Relations Board. So honestly, if you were going to have a moment to give Joe Biden credit for anything, it would be having a much more pro-union NLRB, even though he's still falling significantly short. I just saw yesterday he was basically asked, or Jen Psaki was asked, whether or not Biden is affirmatively standing with the ongoing unionization attempts at Starbucks and Amazon. And basically the position of the administration themselves and of Joe Biden himself is that he's kind of taking a hands-off approach and cheering from the sidelines, which in my opinion is just completely inadequate. You should be aggressively in favor of the unions. You should be going out there and standing on the picket line with striking workers. You should be going and actively encouraging people to join a union. So he definitely falls short on a number of different things, but having an NLRB like this that is not only like hostile, or not only not hostile towards unions, but is actively trying to protect the right to organize by going after some of the main tactics that these corporations are using to propagandize their workers against the unions, that's absolutely fantastic. And if this is implemented, it could have gigantic effects on this, again, ongoing labor movement resurgence that we've been seeing recently. So a little bit more, I think that this is interesting personally, on the history of this Joy Silk doctrine. So she actually tweeted this back in September of 2021, and now it looks like it's going to be more relevant than ever. But just a little bit of history here. She pointed out that 73 years ago today, the United Textile Workers of America urged Joy Silk Mills to recognize it as the collective bargaining representative of Joy Silk's employees. Joy Silk's refusal, which the NLRB found was in bad faith, led to what is known today as the Joy Silk Doctrine. And so they say the facts. After Joy Silk, a textile mill in Hartsville, South Carolina, fired a popular head foreman, workers decided to form a union and strike. And within 2 days, a majority of the workers had signed union cards, and a week later, the union sought recognition and requested to bargain. But Joy Silk refused and insisted on an election. Then it made unlawful promises, questioned employees about the union, threatened their jobs, and implied that raises and benefits might not be forthcoming if the union got in, and the union lost the election and filed charges. So all of those different things, these are the exact same, types of rhetoric and types of anti-union propaganda that we hear right now. Okay, this is something that happened 73 years ago, and they're still using the same goddamn talking points right now at corporations like Amazon and at Starbucks. So, I mean, again, kind of reusing the same type of shit that they've been using for literally decades. It's just a matter of the NLRB now turning around and saying, no, we're not going to abide by this precedent that was essentially dismantled or essentially reinforced under the Nixon administration, and we're going to change this precedent back to where it was pre-Nixon administration and recognize that employers should not have the ability to force their workers to attend anti-union propaganda sessions. I mean, obviously that is impeding with their ability to freely and fairly form a union. You're just intimidating them, you are threatening them, at least in an implicit way. So again, if they change this dynamic and change the precedent, then it would be absolutely fantastic. Just a little bit of details, again, in a graphical representation of the consequences of allowing these types of union busting tactics as we have since essentially, again, the Nixon and Reagan administrations. I mean, you can see it right here in a graph like this. And obviously, captive audience meetings aren't the only way that they go about trying to intimidate their workers from joining a union, but it is one of the main tactics that I've been seeing recently. And you can see it in a graphical representation here when you compare productivity, hourly compensation, and union membership over the last number of decades. So right about here is the Nixon administration and then the subsequent Reagan administration. And you can see here, I mean, when they dismantle stuff like the Joy Silk Doctrine and they allow corporations to engage in these much more robust and aggressive union busting tactics, then you have a significant drop-off and a decline in union membership. And what just so happens to coincide with that is a departure basically of these two lines right here between hourly compensation and productivity. So worker productivity, as union membership goes down, productivity continues to go up and skyrocket as technology improves and workers are becoming much more efficient and productive. And yet hourly compensation has been essentially since the Nixon administration completely stagnant. And so again, it's not really a mystery as to why that tendency would happen. It's because when more people are a part of unions, they have a much better chance at, via their collective bargaining agreement, agreements and via the union going out there and collectively demanding higher pay, better benefits, etc., better working conditions. So it's really not ambiguous. It's really not a mystery as to how these types of things occur. And honestly, having the NLRB change a precedent like this back with the Joy Silk doctrine would be absolutely monumentally fantastic. And I'll keep you guys updated in terms of how we see this roll out. I'm sure that we're going to get a specific case that's coming up that's brought before the NLRB that will decide exactly how they're going to change this precedent. So I'll keep you guys updated as it goes on, but this is absolutely fantastic news.